Welcome back to Show and Teller. I'm so happy you guys are here again for another incredible episode. It is always, as I like to start every episode, a pleasure of mine to have you here joining us. And as you know, we try to bring in some really fantastic guests, people who are pushing the envelope, people who have incredible stories, people who are contributing to our community. And today's guest is doing all of that. And I want to introduce her to you guys, and we'll get to hear her story, get to hear how she got to where she got to today, and what her future plans are going forward in the next year, 5 years, 10 years. We'll drill her today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kylie Ora Lobell.
Thank you so much for having me.
So happy you can be here.
So excited to be here.
And this is our first time having a husband-wife duo, but they're not, well, we did actually have a husband-wife duo with the OBK LA people, Yossi and Chaya, but this is our first separate husband-wife. Husband already filmed about a month and a half ago, and now wife is here. So
when I saw it, I knew I wanted to come on too. It looks so great.
So thank you so much for being here. And you know how I like to start off our episodes is that I want to hear a little bit of your story, your background. How did you grow up? And maybe that'll be the theme of our podcast today. And then you'll tell us certain projects that you're involved with, and I'll start asking you questions regarding that.
Sure. So I grew up in a secular Christian home in Baltimore, Maryland. That meant that we did Christmas and Easter and things like that, but didn't really regularly go to church. My grandmother, who was a very staunch Catholic, would sometimes take me to church. When I was a baby, my mom didn't want to get us baptized because she wasn't religious. She didn't really like growing up Catholic. So I have two older sisters, and my grandma put each one of them in her sink and baptized them in her kitchen sink.
Wow.
And she told me when I was older that I did your older sisters, and then with you, it just didn't work. I was like, I don't know what that means. Did I swat the water away as a baby and say, no, I'm a Jew?
Wow.
But yeah, so I grew up, I would go to her house and she'd try to teach me, the bedtime prayer in Christianity or maybe Catholicism. It's as I lay me down to sleep, pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. And that terrified the living bejesus out of me.
Why?
Because I didn't think about dying at that age. I didn't even have a concept of it. That combined with when, I was told that if you're not baptized, you go to hell, even babies. So you have to be baptized from when you're a baby. And when I would go to school, other kids would say that and repeat that.
Can you tell us what's the concept of why there is something called some baptizing, and what is it actually?
I'm not an expert, and I know that Christians do it at different times, but you're supposed to baptize the baby because they believe we are born into sin. That never sat right with me because when you look at a baby, I just think, oh, this is all good. It's innocent. And later on, when they start, growing up, then you start doing bad things. But every child is innocent in my eyes. So hearing these things, it was very dark. And then seeing JC on the crucifix, all bloodied, the pictures around her home, it just all seemed very dark to me. I did like going for Christmas Mass, for instance. That was nice just to hear the singing because I love the movie Sister Act and I literally know the songs.
A little Whoopi Goldberg, we're good with that.
Yeah. Not a Jew, but so
she might question that though.
Yeah. So I didn't really enjoy it. It was also boring. It's not like there was a kids club. Later on, I came to appreciate my grandmother, and I believe that a lot of my spirituality comes from me seeing her, being so devoted, and we connected later on with, believing in God. So I grew up like that. Parents got divorced when I was very young.
How old were you?
I was 5. I prayed for them not to. And then when they ended up getting divorced, I thought, okay, so prayer doesn't work. Later on, my other grandma, who was like my best friend, always there for me, always went to her house after school. She always encouraged me. She suddenly got very sick, and I was praying to God again, please don't let her die. And then just a few months later, I was at her bedside holding her hand as she passed away. So those two things really affected me because I thought that if you pray, then, God will listen to you.
So at 5 years old, 6 years old, did you then have an active, very putting a pole in the ground saying like, I don't believe in God. Like if God is going to enable sadness or pain to happen in my life, therefore there must not be a God.
So it was later on, because I thought that God existed and there was no question. I think inherently everybody does. And then it's something that shatters them because we're so connected to God. We all have a godly soul. So it wasn't until I was a teenager and I met someone from summer camp and she said, oh, there's no God. I don't believe in God. And I thought, okay, well, I had these things happen to me. The stories from the Bible sounded absolutely crazy, and that God was just this angry guy in the sky. I also said, I believed in Santa when I was little, and that wasn't real. So that means that God probably isn't real either. It's just a fairy tale. And when you're a teenager, you think that you know everything and you're so smart and your parents are dumb. And so I just said, you know what, I'm done. So at around age 12, I became an atheist.
Now, can you tell us the difference between what is an atheist versus what is a agnostic? Like, did you have maybe there is a God and I just don't know if there's a God or not, and that would be the classification of an agnostic? Or did you say, you know what, based on all the evidence, there can't be a God, and therefore I'm an atheist?
Yeah. So agnostic is someone who doesn't really make a decision and wants it both ways.
Right.
And an atheist is someone who just says, no, there's no God, because I just thought the world is too bad. Like, how could there be a God with all this evil happening? And I just had, again, that like cartoonish version of God with no deeper explanation. It all just seemed so dark and negative to me. And, I was like, if there were these so-called miracles that happen in the Bible, where are the miracles today? I don't see any miracles.
And why haven't they happened to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? Seemingly God, you've turned your back on me. And
yes.
I asked for a miracle and you're 0 for 2.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and then when you're a teenager, it's all very intense. And
so did you go to a normal high school?
Yeah, I went to a public school. It was actually a great school. It was like a magnet school,
okay,
which is where you have to apply to get in. And that's where I first knowingly met Jewish people. I immediately gravitated towards this group of Jewish kids from like Pikesville, Owings Mills area of Baltimore. And I just immediately clicked
Lots
with
of
them.
Jews in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Lots of Jews in Pikesville.
Yes. So, and it's a mix of Reform, secular, conservative, Orthodox. So the kids that I was around, it was public school. They were all Reform or, not even Reform, like secular. But they were just so different from what I grew up with. Like I grew up with no talking around the kitchen table. Don't ask questions. We don't hug very much. We don't really say I love you. These kids were loud. They were laughing all the time. They were like musical theater nerds, like just so vibrant. And I could just be myself around them like right away. I just like fell in love with all of them.
Did you like classify yourself like I'm the token friend of the Jews at that point? Or were you like, okay, was it big enough or had an impact on you that already at that point were you asking yourself the question like, okay, I'd like to explore this more, or did that come later?
That came later, but I mean, I went to the Holocaust Museum previously when I was 9. My mom took my sister and I. It affected me very deeply when I saw the videos of, the bodies in the mass graves, and I saw the shoes all around, and I had nightmares for years. I was just crying over it. And then when I met them, I was actually a punk rocker, and the punk rock scene was very much into anti-Nazi at that time. They were called skinheads, but they were like good skinheads who would go out and beat up Nazis. So I actually wore a patch to school of a punk rocker throwing out the swastika into a trash can.
Wow.
My principal came up to me. She's like, Kylie, I get the sentiment, but maybe let's not put that imagery on you. And I said, okay, I understand. I'll take it off. But yeah, I was very much into that for some reason. And then my first boyfriend was Jewish, and he was very secular, but he brought me to a Pesach Seder at his family's house. I had, jarred gefilte fish and manischewitz.
Nothing like some manischewitz and some
it was awful.
The jelly from the gefilte fish. I mean, it's just like you can't. If that's going to sell you, then like, listen, you're an easy sell.
Mostly the warmth of it. And I only knew things from Rugrats Passover and Rugrats Hanukkah. Shout out to David Weiss.
There you go.
Yeah. But I really enjoyed it and just kept gravitating towards, dating Jewish guys and also having Jewish friends.
Okay. So fast forward, what was the next major thing that took place in your life that would you say that stands out and put you on your path that you are today?
Yeah. So I was an atheist, and I was very depressed, anxious. I'd lay in bed thinking about the afterlife and being absolutely terrified. Like, is this just like blackness for the rest of eternity? Like, what happens after? And even though I had a good life, I was in college in New York. I had like prestigious internships at CBS and The Daily Show and The Onion, like all these like really cool things going on. I was healthy.
What was your major?
Journalism.
And where were you?
SUNY Purchase.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's right outside of New York City. And I should have been grateful, but every day I would wake up miserable. And, I'd say if I'm in a bad mood today, then I'm just going to be in a bad mood the rest of the day. Like, if I stub my toe, like, that's it for the day. I was just so not grateful or anything like that. And so I just had this existential crisis, like, especially in my senior year of college. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And then that's when I went to a comedy show one evening. My friend was leaving for LA. He lived in Brooklyn, and he was a comedian. And I went to see him. They like roasted him. And afterwards, I was talking about the internship I just completed at The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, which was miserable. Viacom actually ended up getting sued because they didn't pay the interns, and they would make us do things like take out the trash and lift heavy water bottles and things that you were supposed to pay for.
Wow. Okay.
But I also just wasn't great. It wasn't like totally their fault. I was introverted. I was tired. It was all around just a bad experience. So I was standing in a group of people after my friend's show talking about this. And as soon as I mentioned The Daily Show, I heard a voice say, "Oh, I just interned at Colbert and I had a miserable experience." And we both hadn't talked about it with any of the other interns, A, because they wouldn't validate us. They were all like snooty Ivy Leaguers who pretended or, seemed like they loved it. And B, we didn't want to like get in trouble or be like the odd one out. And so I heard that, and I looked up, and it was this guy, Danny, who was living with my friend, Maddie, who is a comedian. And we both just clicked immediately and started talking about the internships. And then basically, it was funny. I had just eaten a pulled pork sandwich that night. I remember that. And it was delicious. And I was like, this is the night that I met my husband. Danny we'd go on to date, and he'd become my husband. But I graduated from college. I got the internship at The Onion. I needed a place to live. I moved in with Danny, and I was broke in my early 20s. So was he. He was a comedian. And he had said to me, like, his family wasn't too happy about the fact that I wasn't Jewish. And if we ever got married.
Because Danny grew up.
He grew up like conservative, Sephardic traditional, but he went to an Orthodox school. He ended up getting kicked out of Orthodox high school for bad grades in secular studies, which was like a very rare thing that never happened, but it happened to him.
Danny Lobell, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. So he went on a path to secular. And then when he became a comedian, he was doing Shabbat, but you had to perform on Friday nights. So eventually he just gave up everything. So at this point, he was a 10 years off the derech, which means that you're not religious anymore. He didn't go so far as to eat pork or anything, but he wasn't doing Shabbat. The only holiday he really did was Yom Kippur. But to say the least, even though if you wanted to say that Danny was off the derech, I mean, not necessarily keeping Shabbat and not a practicing Jew, but I would imagine in his mind, if and when he was going to get married, he wanted to marry a Jewish woman. Yes.
And that was probably a value to him and to his family. So now he just got completely smacked over the head and enamored by Kylie. And now he probably has to like balance this and say, oh my gosh, I really am falling for this woman. But at the same time, my family, oh my gosh, such a shanda. I'm not allowed to really be with somebody who's not Jewish. So did he communicate that with you? Was that something that you were aware of, or was it like, we'll get through this, or how did you guys progress past that?
So when he said that to me, I can only marry a Jewish woman. I thought, well, I'm only 21 years old. I'm not thinking about marriage. And he intentionally dated non-Jewish women because he didn't want to get married in the first place. He didn't want to get married, didn't want to have kids. So he didn't want anything serious. But then when he met me and we fell in love, he's like, oh no, this is actually going to get serious. So at that point, he's like, let's just deal with it down the line. If we're together in 5 years, we'll deal with it. I didn't care. I was young. I didn't think about marriage or kids or anything.
He's a little bit older than you?
He's 5 years older.
Okay.
Yeah. So we start dating, and we're like 2 months into dating. We're both broke one Friday morning. I don't know where we're going to get food that day. I literally had $6 in my bank account because my internship didn't pay. And because I was working that internship, I couldn't work another job. And he was just getting random gigs here and there. Before I had met him, he had started going to a local Chabad, Jewish organization, for Friday night dinner sometimes, because one Yom Kippur, he felt compelled to make a vow. He said, Hashem, God, I'm going to keep one Shabbat this year. And he didn't do it. And then he kept running into this Chabad rabbi, Chabad of North Brooklyn in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, Rabbi Shmuley Lane. And he kept telling him, you have to come for Friday night dinner. And every time Danny would say no, eventually he gave in. And he loved it because it was so different from anything he'd experienced before. There was no pressure. Like, he always thought he was going to go to Chabad and they were going to pressure him immediately, but it wasn't. Like, the rabbi and his family were the only religious ones. And everyone else was like hipster Williamsburg, like tech people. And so he loved it. And so that Friday he said, okay, we're broke. I know a place where we can get free dinner tonight. It's called Chabad. I said, what's Chabad? I'd only seen religious Jews in Baltimore, like Williamsburg, Brooklyn. To me, they were just people who wore a lot of black, even in the summer. I thought they must be really hot. They had a lot of kids, and they're always walking somewhere. Why are they always walking? They were walking because it was Shabbat or something. That's all I knew. I didn't know the differences between any types of Jews or anything at that point. So I said, okay, I'll go. And he said, just lie and say you're Jewish. And I was like, okay. Rabbi didn't even ask when we got there. And we sat down, we said chamotzi. The rabbi spoke beautifully. I looked around the table. There was warm challah bread in my stomach that I tried for the first time. I looked around the table. Everyone's laughing and talking, and there's all different types of people. And I felt this warmth in my chest that I've never felt before. And I said immediately in my head, this is God. And from that point, basically, I believed in God again. So that was a very pivotal moment.
Did you say, okay, God, I'm willing to give you a chance. God, I see the joy in the world, or I'm experiencing you right now. This, like, how can you go from the disparity of no God to then just a God? So you told me what happened, but what happened that shift happened in your brain?
I think it was just a feeling. I don't know. Just like, I'm meant to be here, and God must have orchestrated this for me to be here. Because there were times
God wants me to be happy. God wants me to have joy in my life. Like, where leading up to that, you obviously had some joyful experiences or occurrences that took place. But why at that moment? What happened at that moment?
I think in that moment, I just found where I was meant to be. That everything else hadn't explained God properly to me, or
So it was family. It was family.
It was like
the
connection,
traditions.
Yes.
There's a transmission for many years that people have been doing this, and you felt connected to that transmission. You felt connected to that. We say Masorah, but you felt that, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah, and just the community of it and the love in the room, and I started looking back at my life, and all these things I thought were coincidence was just kind of fate. And I was like, well, if there's fate and these things are meant to be, then I think there's a God. And I had that feeling, and every time I'd always want to go back because I'm like, I want that good feeling again. It was the only time I ever felt it. And so I kept saying to Danny, can we go back? And he'd be like, okay, like,
this is my rabbi, not yours.
It's like, I don't know where this is going. We can, but just take it easy.
Settle down.
Yeah. So we kept going back. And the more that I learned, for instance, from the rabbi when he spoke like about Noah's Ark, I thought was this like crazy story. And then I learned all the symbolism behind it. Like, it took so long for Noah to build the ark because he was supposed to tell the people to
do teshuvah, repent, return.
Yeah. Stop sinning, go back to God. Learning the commentaries on these stories. And before, it just seemed all like fantastical and made up. And once you start learning the commentaries on things,
a little mystical, magical.
Yeah. Once you start learning the commentaries on these things, they absolutely make sense. And it's very rational and logical. And then he was starting to answer so many questions I had, like, why do bad things happen to good people? It's very complicated, but just at the end of the day, you just have to trust that God has a plan, even if we don't know what it is. I learned that, this isn't the only life we have. Not only are there like past lives, but there's another world. This is one world. We can go to the next world, and this isn't all there is. And so just the more I learned Torah, the more these questions started getting answered in my head. I did approach it from a very rational place because I think it is very rational and it makes sense.
So you were going to this rabbi's house for a Friday night dinner, and you would hear him give Devar Torah, which is a word of Torah, and you were also learning on your own. You would open up the Chumash, not the Chumash, but you would open up the Chumash.
I think that's a casino.
Yes, that's it. So you would open up the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, and you'd start reading it on your own as well?
Yeah, I did that a little bit. And then I also started going to Danny's parents' house for Shabbat. And that was very interesting because they're Sephardic, Turkish, and they went to a Moroccan synagogue. And that just like struck me in the heart. I loved it. I loved the singing, the look of the synagogue.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can edit this if this is not, but had Danny at this point already said, I'm dating a non-Jewish person? And were they okay? Did they let you in your house? Were that any time were they standoffish to you? Did they push you away? Did they say, you're not good enough to be with my son because you're not Jewish? Like, just wanted to know what?
No, they didn't ever have that conversation with me. They welcomed me in, which was very nice. And, I think also just kind of like deal with it, see where this goes, because our son has dated other non-Jewish girls and it's gone nowhere. So who's to say that this is the one or whatever? But yes, they did welcome me and I loved it. Again, like my friends in high school, like everyone's talking over each other at the Shabbat table and it's just laughing and joyous and it was so entertaining. And then when you grow up as like a white person, you don't eat so much. Shabbat dinner was the most food I'd ever seen in my life. I couldn't believe the courses that kept coming out. I thought the appetizers were it. And I ate a ton, and I ate a ton of challah bread. And at the end of it, I was so stuffed. And I was laying in bed like after Friday night dinner. And I'm like, Danny, this is the most food I've ever had in my life. And he's like, welcome to Judaism.
Kylie, I want to, with your permission, I usually like to stay pretty linear, and we'll get back to your story. But you said something, and I feel like you're the person to talk to about this. So there's something that's been bothering me a little bit, and we live in 2025, Los Angeles. We live in a pretty accepting, progressive, liberal world where we, for all intents and purposes, try not to espouse racism or I'm better than you type of ideology. And I think we're all raised that way. And many of us, hopefully, were raised that way where we're, meant to look at everybody as equals. But I just thought of this. I'm like, as a Jew who grew up in Los Angeles, who went to a Catholic high school, I also went to a Catholic high school, and all my friends were Filipino and Latin American growing up in Van Nuys, California. I had all different types of friends. However, growing up, I also had this idea that you're only allowed to marry Jewish. And the more I think about it, it's a pretty pretentious idea. It's a pretty rough idea, because inherently I'm saying to some degree, I'm not accepting you, and maybe you're not as good enough as me. And as a rabbi, like, I kind of get it, because we've kind of been through thousands of years as Jews of Holocausts, Inquisitions, being thrown out of our land, and we want to stay with our people and make sure that our future generation has that same belief that we do. But at the same time, it's also doesn't seem very 2025 to push people away. So I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on this concept. Like, does that make us inherently racist, that we as Jews are only going to marry our own kind? And being that you're somebody who, we haven't gotten to that part of the story yet, but who has converted, but you weren't raised Jewish and now you are Jewish, do you view this, that this was a little racist, a little anti-accepting of humankind? And what were your thoughts around that?
So with Danny's family, no, I never thought it was anything racist or even anything personal, because his grandmother survived the Holocaust. She got on a train at age 13 because she had blonde hair and blue eyes, with a train full of Nazis, and terrified out of her mind, had to leave her mother, had to leave her grandmother, who was exterminated by the Nazis. And she escaped and she survived, went to Glasgow, Scotland, led a beautiful life. So once I heard that, I heard that Danny went to Jewish school and all his brothers. I heard the history of the Jewish people, how they had been persecuted, how they hadn't been so welcoming to outsiders because of this. I also learned how Judaism goes through the mother. And that's for a very logical reason, again, because you always know who the mother is. And also the beautiful concept that the spirituality of the home is determined by the mother, which I absolutely loved. Judaism, to me, I wouldn't call myself like some big feminist, but I do think that women have this very powerful role in Judaism, and it is actually a very feminist, women-centric religion, which I love that too. So it is very progressive, as you say. I don't think that just because we're in 2025 that like we're better than past generations. Like, it doesn't, what society's doing doesn't always mean that it's right. And the only time I was offended was when I had dated another Jewish boy in college, and he was laughing to me one day, and I was like, what's so funny? And he goes, well, my sister just told me that shiksas are just for practice. And I thought the word shiksa was like funny and cute before then. And once I heard that, I was like, I'm never using that word again. It's so offensive to non-Jewish women. And also it like overly sexualizes them. It makes you feel like a plaything, that this relationship wasn't real and I actually love this boy. And it puts them on a pedestal so that, if you say like a non-Jewish woman is this like very desirable thing, well then what does that mean for Jewish women? Jewish women are also very desirable, and it fetishizes non-Jewish women. So what's the Jewish boy going to do? He's going to run towards that. If you tell him no, any kid would do that. So I was only offended by that comment from, my ex-boyfriend's sister. Never use the word shiksa again. Once I learned the history of the Jewish people, I completely understood why they would be skeptical of outsiders, why it would be hard to convert. And so I think that everyone can be friends with people. It's just about passing along the tradition. I see it as a positive thing, not a negative thing.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
I just was inspired to want to ask that, because I can see from an outsider's point of view, and they'll be like, why are you making such a big deal?
Yeah.
Like, we're humans. And to some degree, I wonder if because we as the Jewish people are so insular in so many ways, does that create hatred from the outsiders?
No, what creates hatred is just people having hatred in their hearts. It's their problem. It's not ours. I think everybody relates to people who are similar to them, but that doesn't mean we don't respect other people or make friends with them.
So they're basically being less tolerant of our insularness of trying to just keep with our family and keep together. And they just assume that we're pretentious and that we're looking down on them, when the reality is we're not.
Not at all. And I also find that within Jews, like my friend who was secular would go to Williamsburg with me because that's where we lived, and be like, oh, these Orthodox Jews, they're looking at me and they are judging me. It's like, no, we're not. We literally don't care. They can do whatever they want. We can do whatever we want. There's a lot of infighting over that. Like, I don't think I'm better than anyone. And the thing is that humans are different. Men are different from women. People of different races are different. But what's beautiful about this world is that we can all coexist and respect each other. I think it's beautiful that everybody has a different culture, different race. I just think it's totally fine. I don't even, the word insular doesn't even resonate with me, because I've just seen how welcoming Orthodox Jews are, and we do go out in the world. The Lubavitcher Rebbe met with everyone, I've had all different kinds of people at my Shabbat table, and I think we should be doing more of that, certainly, teaching people about what Judaism really is. There's a lot of misconceptions, especially about Orthodox Jews, and I want to put out a more positive one, because the one you see in the media typically is not the truth.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for taking me, going with me on that tangent. Going back to your story now. So This might be a good transition, or a good sequitur comes next, is that, so then at what point did you say, you know what? I now want to be Jewish. I see the beauty. I saw the beauty. There's a God now. He's part of my life. I now want to be a part of that. And what exactly did you want to be a part of?
So it was a few months after we started going to Chabad, and then his parents for Friday night dinner. I did my first Yom Kippur. Again, I ate way too much before the fast.
Which is a mitzvah.
Yes. And then way too much at the break fast after all the muffins and everything, the bagels. I started doing all these holidays, and I loved it. I always wanted to go back for more. And I just Googled, conversion, and I started buying these books. And Danny went away to do comedy gigs in South Africa. My pile of books was this big. When he came home, it was this big. Like, I just kept learning. Eventually, I had to break the news to him that I wanted to convert. And
you guys weren't engaged at this point? No,
we were just dating. We were years away from that, because again, he probably didn't even want to get married. And I told him, I really think I belong here. I think I have a Jewish soul. We'd gone to Chabad, and this Holocaust survivor looked me in the eye, and she's like, why do you want to be part of this? Everyone hates us. And I said, I don't really have a choice. Like, I just have been gravitating towards this for so long, and it's me returning to who I am. They say that all souls who are Jewish were at Sinai receiving the Torah with Moshe, with God, and that the souls travel throughout the generations to get back to the person. So that's what converts are. Later on, when I did my DNA test, I was 0.8% Ashkenazi Jew. My family was from Germany. So.
You tried. Listen.
Yeah. The more cholent I eat, the more it goes up, because, 23andMe is always updating it. So I told her that. And so I told Danny. He was not very happy, because he didn't want to get dragged back into this community that he thought had rejected him. He had some bad experiences. And he said, okay, well, Reform's not enough. Orthodox is too much. Don't want to get back into that. Just do conservative. I didn't know what any of it meant, but I just Googled like conservative rabbi, New York. We set up a meeting with a conservative rabbi. It was at I didn't know at the time, a non-kosher, kosher style deli. All he asked us, he's like, Danny, do you like farmer's cheese? And Danny said, yeah. He looked at me, he said, will you miss Christmas? I said, not really. And then he looked at Danny and he said, do you like tongue? Danny said, yeah. And then he goes, okay, you're good. We'll start the classes. I converted a ton of celebrities, Nancy Sinatra. I don't know if she's still Jewish. And Danny's like, once someone's Jewish and they convert, they're always Jewish. He's like he didn't have any real explanations. And we just kind of, he seemed like scammy. And he said, it's going to be $100 a class. I don't know how long it'll take. Could take years. I looked at my bank account. There was like $65. Again, I'm still broke in New York City, 21 years old. And I said, okay, I'm not doing that. I went to another conservative rabbi, and he said, if you're not ready to get married, I can't start the process for you. But if you can go to take this class at the 92nd Street Y. So I go there, and it's being taught by a modern Orthodox rabbi with a knitted yarmulke with the fish logo on it. He was a fish head, and he was very nice. And I was surrounded by basically Wall Street bankers with their hot Russian girlfriends, like mail order bride girlfriends.
Wow.
And I just love what I was learning. It was the first time. It was like an intro to Judaism class, but because it was taught by an Orthodox rabbi, like you learned so much.
Yeah.
And I said to him at the end of the class, I want to continue with my conversion process. What should I do? And he said, just Google synagogue near me on Google. I did that. I called up the synagogue. This very soft voice at the other line answered. And he said, my name is Rabbi Maurice Applebaum, and I have a synagogue, the Greenpoint Shul in Brooklyn, which was very rare because Greenpoint is a Polish neighborhood. It's not Jewish at all. And he said, come to synagogue on Shabbat and see what it's all about. I dragged Danny there. He didn't want to go. We had to set separately because there was a mechitza. And right away he realized, oh no, this is an Orthodox synagogue. I didn't know the difference. And
for you, you're like, okay, this is just what it is. And he's just now freaking out.
Yeah, it was a very lovely experience. The rabbi had a little girl, and I was so touched. She ran up to him and he hugged her, and she was on his shoulders throughout the services as he's praying. Everyone was very nice, a nice sit down kiddush, like the meal after services. People were showing me what pages we were on. So it was like this modern Orthodox, very Hamish shul in this historic building from 1900. And afterwards, Daniel was furious. He's like, you didn't tell me this is an Orthodox synagogue. And I'm like, I don't know the difference. And he's like, I'm not getting back into that. And he kept fighting me. And I'm like, well, they happen to have a conversion class. He's like, well, you go, I'm not going. And it's very weird for a shul to just have a conversion class. That's very rare. So I started going to that with Rabbi Applebaum, who was this very kind man, like Danny's age, very sweet and sensitive. And I started learning, more about Torah. I started keeping kosher. I turned our kitchen kosher, my half. Danny allowed me one half to be kosher, and then his was treif, not kosher. But what really struck me is, as you know, we have a lot of pets, and we actually had a chicken and rooster at the time. And I learned the laws of, eating. I still have chickens. We learned the laws of kosher, where the animal has to die painlessly or else it's not kosher. And I love that because I wasn't going to give up meat, but to know that the animal wasn't suffering in its death, I just right away, I'm like, okay, I'm keeping kosher. I gave up crab, which wasn't easy because I'm from Baltimore. I knew how to pick a crab before I knew how to walk.
Those blue crabs.
Amazing. And yeah, I just kept going with it. Started doing Shabbat. I was a workaholic, so I loved Shabbat, taking time off. And I just kept going to my class. And one night Danny came, and after the class, he sat down with the rabbi and just yelled at him for like 30 minutes straight about how he didn't want to do this, how he had a bad, experience in high school, getting kicked out, kept having bad experiences with it. He was never going to come to class. Don't force me into this. And at the end of this rant, the rabbi just says, okay, you don't have to come back. You never have to come if you don't want to. But let me give you a perspective. I grew up Orthodox. I'm still Orthodox. I love it. And now as an adult, you can shape your own experiences. If you want, you can come and you can give it a chance. And there's no pressure. And that calmed Danny down a lot. The next week, he came to class. And we had our battles for sure about it. But he was kind of rediscovering who he was. He always loved Judaism as a kid. He was always making sure everything was kosher. When he went to a high school for like reject Jews, as he calls it, they were like kids who were drug addicts and had all these issues, and he was praying and they would throw spitballs at him. And so he just stopped praying because he didn't want to be bullied. But he went back to praying, and it really calmed him down. So from there, I kept going with my Orthodox conversion. And
how long did it take you?
So I started in New York. I was going to do an RCA conversion. And then once we moved to LA, you couldn't do that anymore. You have to be in the city. So then, because
you have to be, the families have to see you and how you're progressing. You have to be part of a community.
Yes. And we moved to Pico Robertson when we came here.
You moved out here for work?
So we moved for a few reasons. One was my husband was hired by comedian Ralphie May, who sadly passed away, but he was hired by him to do his podcast, to be the producer on it, A. And B, we lived next to an Ecuadorian gangster who started getting increasingly violent in New York City. And we couldn't leave we couldn't move because it was rent controlled. So in New York, the apartments were very expensive and you had to make 40 times your rent or something crazy, first and last month's rent. So we couldn't move. So we're like, we can't even move. Let's just move out of state to a nicer place that's warm and where we can live in a Jewish neighborhood, because we didn't live in one. So we moved to Pico Robertson and I restarted my conversion process. And then I got
the RCC.
So I did.
Sorry, that was a personal question.
So I did another program, and then I did do a second one with the RCC, but both were Orthodox. And the reason I did a second one is because the first one was not approved in Israel.
Got it. Which
only 40 Beit Din in the world are approved by the Israeli rabbinate. So I said, I want the gold standard. I just want to make sure that if I ever move to Israel or my kids do, that there's no problem.
The first one you didn't know about and you weren't aware.
Yeah. So it was totally accepted by RCC or other Orthodox Beit Din. But because I care about Israel, like 95% of Jews, I wanted to make sure that rabbinically I was accepted as well there. I ended up doing that one after we got married. So I did the first one. We got married and I'd also gone to Israel. Right before we got married, I went to seminary, Madreshet Rachel, and my husband went to Darchei Noam, which is part of the same.
Chappelle's and Madreshet Rachel.
Yeah. We got engaged at the Kotel in the snow. I was the only one on the women's side, and it was the snow falling, and I just felt God, just the stillness of it. When it snows, it's like when it rains in LA, Israelis don't leave the house. It rarely snows there, but they just don't want to deal with it. So there was no one at the Kotel on my side, and just a special moment with Hashem putting my note in the wall. I hope to have a wonderful marriage and children and everything. So we got married, and we are both observant Jews now in Los Angeles, in Pico Robertson, which I believe is the best community in the diaspora. No one's going to tell me otherwise. It's just such an accepting, out of the box place where you see people of all different types. Everybody shul hops. Nobody's in a box. And we're all friends. And I love that.
So then you became a halachic Jew, which means you were recognized in the eyes of God that you were now Jewish. Mm-hmm. And you, career-wise, what were you doing? And what have you been doing now? Leading up to where you are now in your career? So
I got my degree in journalism, and I actually started a blog for a site that doesn't exist anymore. I don't think. It was called Juicy, like Jewcy. And I look back at those and it's so funny. Like I was spelling Shabbat wrong, and I was like, it was just so cute when I look back. Like I did a half Shabbat today, and like any Baal Tshuva or someone who becomes religious, will relate to it, or any convert. So I was doing journalism, like freelancing for the Greenpoint Gazette and other papers when I came here, like LA Times, places like that. And I also started doing marketing, publicity. And I mostly do marketing and publicity now for Jewish authors and organizations. I still write on the side, and I have my book coming out about my conversion process called Choosing to Be Chosen on Wicked Son.
It's right over there.
Yeah.
I can't get up and show you the book, but it's right over there. Greg, yeah. let's show that book. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah. So that I worked on for 6 years. It's a lot of work to do a book.
Choosing to Be Chosen.
And the whole thing of it is miraculous. I got my agent. I got the book deal. I always wanted to be on Wicked Son because it is a Jewish publisher. And all these like pro-Israel, pro-Jewish books came out on it. So I'm very happy. And it's a huge accomplishment. I don't know. Have you written a book?
I've not written a book.
It's a lot of work.
It's like a baby.
Yes. And next I'll try maybe a novel, but...
Okay. How many kids do you have, Kanai Nahara?
3.
3 kids. How old are they?
They are By the time this comes out, probably one of them is going to be 4. The other is 6, and the other is a year. And
Amazing. Should have lots of nachas.
Yes, becoming a mother it's just the best thing.
And if you can leave our audience with something, words of wisdom, your closing remarks, what would you like to finally, like, if you could give over who you are in an essence, so people could be left inspired, what would you want to say to them?
Yeah. I'd say that God is right here. He's not some, thing in the sky that's inaccessible. He's always right here. He's always around us. You just have to access him. You have to tap into your godly soul, do the things that foster that connection with God, that strengthen that connection. One thing that was very important to me in my journey was gratitude, because as I said, I would wake up depressed and anxious and think today's going to be a bad day. I wasn't grateful at all. Now every day, the first thing I do when I wake up is I say Modeh Ani, where you thank God for returning your soul to you, bringing you back to life, essentially. And that if everything else is going wrong in your life, at least you're breathing. At least, bli en hara, as we say, you're healthy.
Without an evil eye.
Yeah. Sephardic household, that's what happens. You're healthy, you're alive, and that's it. Everything else can be going wrong, but that's it. And that means that God wants you to be here and you still have a mission. So figure out the ways that you can connect to God. God is real. Even if there are bad things happening in the world, study why. The fact that we have free choice. People always say to me, like, how can you believe in God when there's so much evil in the world? Which was my question before I believed in God. And so I studied it and I keep studying it. Learn about having trust and faith, emunah and bitachon in God, and that things will be okay. And every day that you wake up is a gift. There are miracles that are occurring. Your life is a miracle. Figure out what you're meant to do in a godly way and make the world a better place.
And with that, Kylie Ora Lobell, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, your wisdom, your stories. And I would say I learned a lot today, and you have a great story, and you really are adding to our very amazing community with what you're doing. And these kinds of stories, we all need to be inspired. And I guarantee that there is somebody out there who will be listening to this who will say, man, I was going through some struggles, or I didn't know the steps. And I think you sharing your process and where your insights and your process along the way will, God willing, give inspiration to somebody. So thank you for that.
Amen.
And I give you only blessing, and you should continue to have joy and get lots of nachas from your family and from our community.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on. It was lovely.
Okay. We'll do it again.
Oh, it's awesome.
Take care. Thank you.
That flew by.
It was good. We were in it.
Yes, very deep questions.